Hi, this is Joe Chambers. Welcome to Musicians Hall of Fame Backstage the Vault Series. Today's interview is with Mark Miller. Mark has engineered every album that Garth Brooks has done, which would put him up engineering as many record sales almost as, say, the Beatles. Mark came to town to be a songwriter, and he was a musician. He's a good guitar player as well. I think he toured the world playing with Dobie Gray, actually. He's written some fine songs. Garth even refers to him as the eighth musician because the way that he plays the console like it was a musical instrument. Hope you enjoy it. If you do, be sure to hit like, subscribe, and the notification bell so you don't miss any of our new content. Once again, recording engineer Mark Miller.
In 1978 is when we moved here, and through fate or whatever, we found this little duplex in Green Hills and moved in there. And the lady that owned the house was Sandy Mason, who's a songwriter. She wrote When I Dream, Two Pina Coladas for Garth Brooks, and through her, I started playing in her band. She'd go out and perform, and while I was there, I also met a guy named Dobie Gray, who I ended up playing guitar in his band for about 5 years. I traveled to Africa, traveled all over the country. Through my landlady, Sandy, I met Alan Reynolds, and he owned Jack's recording studio, and he was responsible for, at that time, he was the producer on Don't Make My Brown Eyes Blue, and it was like, I couldn't believe that, because, that was a record that just blew me away when I first heard it. I had no idea of, working in a recording studio, but he had a recording studio and said, hey, I was playing with Dobie and I was painting houses when we weren't touring, and I said, man, that sounds like a good deal. So I went to work at Jack's Jack. That was 25 years ago. At the time, Alan was using an engineer named Garth Fundus, who's gone on to produce a lot of great artists. But I just kept my eyes open, and I was pretty adept at gear just because I'd been a guitar head all my life. So it was pretty natural for me to kind of, move toward the engineering thing, and it was wide open for me there, because when Alan wasn't cutting somebody, the studio it wasn't for hire, so it was just sitting there. So I could take these old tapes that were sitting around and put them up and practice mixing, pretend mixing. I did my own mix on Don't Make My Brown Eyes Blue, just because it was around there, And so that's basically how I got into engineering records. I kind of backed into it. I didn't go to any school to do it or anything. I just kind of learned by observation, and through that association came my whole engineering career. Basically, I'm really the odd engineers that I've got to sit literally in the same seat for my career, which is pretty unusual because it's a job where you're normally going studio to studio, and you're an independent contractor trying to find a gig. But I've been able to avoid all the hardships of that, really. First thing I did was with Rodney Dillard. He had just gone to this little town called Branson, Missouri. Literally, it was 1981, and I'd never heard of Branson. I don't think anybody else had over here, but they had a theme park over there called Silver Dollar City. And Rodney and a few remnants of his group, what were they called? The Dillards, of course, were performing in this setting over there. It was like outdoors. It was a theme park. It was all about the Ozarks and Arkansas and all that, or Missouri, I should say. And they did an album literally for the theme park that they came and talked to Alan about producing. And that was the first album I ever did, was with Rodney. And that was 1982 or 83, I believe, 82. And it was a thing, I think, where Alan gave me the opportunity to do that, knowing that it wouldn't be an album in the mainstream, that it would be something that would, he was absolutely proud of it, but it was something that he could also give me a shot at. So that was my first session.
And then, so what was your first mainstream session?
Kathy Mattea was the first things we did. That I can remember the first time I heard a record on the radio that I had mixed. It was like, I was down in Florida on vacation with my family. It was like, we had to pull over, It was like one of those moments. And I remember the first time it was a song called He Won't Give In. And driving down the freeway in Florida, and they announced it, and it was like we had to pull over the side, you know. And it was cool, you know. I mean, it's like I'm sure it's like.
Did you walk a little taller?
Sure, Garth Brooks told me he had the same when he first heard his first single on the radio. He said he'd pull over the side of the road and cried. You know, it's like I can understand that. You know, it's like it's just like kind of a you've done something. You know, it's kind of like you got through to more people than you ever thought you would. You know, and plus it's reaffirmation of your work. You know, it's like you know that song didn't go all that high on the charts, but it was #1 for me. You know, and you know, but. At the time, I remember me and Alan would joke about not telling Kathy how young I was at this, because you know, she was new at it too. So I kind of got to grow up with her in the studio. It was really a great relationship, and through that, I got to work with just some of the best musicians in the world. Because Alan obviously was already an established producer. You know, he'd done all the great Crystal Gale records and. My first real credit was about 1981. I got to assist on a Bobby Bear record we did at the studio, and one of the neatest things we did was we built a live chamber when I first came there. It's still there. It's a great chamber, but we had this out back building that was at some point used as a rehearsal hall and as a studio room, not an art studio room, not a recording studio room. So we converted it to a live chamber, and it turned out.
How did you do that?
Well, we built a building within the building for it to be quiet, you know, because that was the main thing. You couldn't have any external sounds influencing it. So we went around town and got to crawl into all the live chambers here in town, of which there aren't really too many. There's a few of them.
Did you go to CBS, to Columbia's?
Yeah, we did go to Columbia. We went to the Sound Emporium, which got one. We went to Quad Studio, which has this weird little thing in the basement that they call a chamber, but it's really strange. And so we just, I mean, there was at that time, there may be now, but there was like nowhere to look up information on this. We built walls that were like massively thick and
concrete,
brick block, but they were filled with sand, and we had the floor. We separated the floor from the slab of, you know, actually had a cut, so the floor was lying independent, and built these walls so thick. Unbelievable, with like just incredible amounts of mass, and finished it off in no parallel walls. It's about 1,300 cubic feet, and
that's pretty big.
It's pretty good size, and finished it off with this beautiful plaster finish, you know. And first voice we really got to hear through it was Bobby Bear, and it was like it just killed us, you know. It's like, God, listen to that, and it's just, to this day it's a beautiful echo. It's the echo on 99% of Garth Brooks records. The Dance, it's the echo. Much Too Young to Feel This Old. I mean, it's all that echo. I call it one of my little secret weapons. You know, is that it's unique. I've tried to replicate it with every gizmo in the world and can't even come close. You know, it's just too random. You know, the real
so
thing.
Explain to people how that works.
Well, what happens is you have a knob on your console, your recording console, and it's called a send knob, which what that does is it takes that voice, when you turn it up, if it's a voice on that channel, it sends it to a speaker inside the echo chamber. Inside the echo chamber, there's two microphones placed in what they call an XY position, without being too technical, which stops these mics from canceling out, which if I told you about that would be real technical, but what you have basically is a set of ears in there that listens to a speaker. So the speaker plays it in there, and it echoes in there, and the microphones pick it up. They go back to the console, and you can blend in as much of that as you want, or take as much of it out as you want. When we first built it, I'd show it to people, and they go, "How do you get Crystal Gale to go in there and sing?" I said, "Well, that's not how it works," but I could understand what they were thinking. But so it's basically a room where you send something to, and then it comes back to you through the microphones, but it comes back to you sounding like it's in this huge valley. It's a great little gizmo that's been almost totally replaced by electronics now. You know, they've got machines that can just, you know, replicate anything you want, but it's not the same, you know.
Did you start working with Garth in the very beginning?
Garth Brooks? Yeah, in fact, I met him, I think, about '87, you know. He came by the studio. I think it was his first meet with Alan. Alan was a few minutes late, so we just kind of hung around and talked, and he was just this young guy, you know. I didn't know anything about him, nobody did, and seemed real nice, though, but he asked me a lot of questions, you know, very curious, you know. He asked me questions and asked my opinion, and would really listen, you know. I thought, well, it's kind of unusual sometimes, you know, in the music business, where people give you their opinion a lot, but they won't really listen to you. But I thought he was a nice enough guy, and he was very, 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 very sweet, you know, and innocent, and that's pretty unusual. But, you know, a lot of artists are like that when you first meet them, because they don't have anything to prove, that, you know, they don't have any reputation to live up to. But he was a pretty genuine guy. I thoroughly liked him, you know. I mean, he was just likable. But, you know, there's a lot of artists that had come by to talk with Alan at the time, because he was a hot producer, you know. I remember meeting Steve Wariner one time when he came by to talk to Alan, I think, about producing. This was years ago, and we got into a neat conversation about Indiana, because we're both from just about the same parts of, he's from north of Indianapolis, and I'm from the east side of it, and we just kind of knew a lot of spots in common. I think at the time he was working with Barbara Mandrell or something like that. I mean, this goes way back. Yeah, Garth, I think I met him about 87, I believe, and what did we do? I'm not sure, you know, you've already interviewed Alan, but I can remember his first session pretty well. We did about 3 or 4 songs. I'm actually just copying this. I heard Alan say all this out there. But I remember it was a cool session. It was very neat, but the song that really blew me away was If Tomorrow Never Comes. I thought, man, that is not only a great performance, but that's a great song, you know.
Who wrote that, by the way?
Him and
Garth did co-write it?
Garth's a co-writer. Him and Kent Blasey,
Oh, yeah.
I believe, wrote that song together. But that song, it just spoke to me in a way, and I said, man, this is a big song, you know. Whether it's big for him, I didn't know, but I think it went on to be a #1 song, but it was one of the first times I'd kind of just hit a song and went, man, I hope that's a hit, because boy, it feels like it to me, and it did go on to be a hit, but you know, I just knew he was good from the beginning. You know, I didn't know he was going to be a star or anything, because you just never know that stuff. It's you know, there's too many factors involved. You know, but I don't know.
So how did things change with
Things with Garth changed very little. I mean, it's like you know, things got more hectic. Like there'd be people hanging out in the parking lot wanting to catch a glimpse of him and things like that. But from 1988 until now, he's used the same band in the studio, literally the same musicians, which is very rare. So the only things that changed was that he got busier. You know, we'd see him less because he'd go on the road. We'd have, you know, less time to focus in the studio, just because, you know, not only gets busy on the road, but your whole life just goes crazy. And I was glad I didn't have to live his life. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, when we're done with an album, we're done with it. We can kind of sit back, but he's got to go out and sell it. You know, he's got to live the life of being the artist. And wow,
stuff in
what a
it?
job!
Yeah. Well, how did things change for y'all?
Well, everything changed for me, because suddenly I'm an engineer that everybody goes, oh, you know, you have respect with your peers, which is pretty nice. You know, I mean, it doesn't mean anything, but you know, it's just like you know what it's like when you write a good song and people go, hey, good job, you know. So it affords you that. People want to interview you like this, you know. You wouldn't be interviewing me if it wasn't for Garth, I'm sure, and that's nice. Financially, everything gets better because, you know, rising tide lifts all the boats. So you know, things just got better. You know, things got good. You know?
Did you get more artists to produce?
Well, you know, me and Alan have stayed busy throughout that whole period. We had a run of about 15 years there, where it was like, when we look back on it now, it's pretty amazing. We also, throughout that time, I bet I did 50 other albums. I mean, you know, we did 3 albums with Emmylou Harris. We did, I think, 6 albums with Hal Ketchum through that same period. We did an Don Williams album, Crystal Gale album. I did about 3 Nanci Griffith albums for a producer named Jim Rooney. Yeah, I just got real busy. I mean, a lot of the '90s is a blur to me. We also did a Memphis Boys album. You know, I can't even remember all the albums I did through that same period. So yeah, I got real busy, which was great. You know, one of the unique things about Garth's career is that it was all done in the same room, man. That's pretty unusual, it really is, and you know, through the same console, literally, and through the same chamber, a lot of the same mics, and it's just, I think it's provided a subtle consistency, you know. I mean, and when I hear his records on the radio today, they sound a little different, you know, and I guess that's good, you know. I mean, because a lot of things sound alike to me, you know, in all genres of music, and something different just kind of tweaks my ear a little bit. But you know, I've been doing it long enough that I don't listen like a normal person. I have a hard time listening normally because I tend to listen technically sometimes, you know.
So what kind of board did y'all use over at Jack's Tracks?
Well, we've used a Quad 8 console, which, you know, Pink Floyd chained 2 of these up to do Dark Side of the Moon on. It's a great console. It's a console built in Hollywood, California, of all places. Not the hotbed of electronical work, but API is the people that originally... The fellow who designed the API console designed the Quad 8 console. And what we have is called the Quad 8 Coronado, and it's famed for its preamps. It's got preamps in them that are just like people buy racks of them now just to have them. And the preamp, for anybody that doesn't know, is what the microphone goes through, and that goes to the tape machine. And it's the part that makes it sound great. You've got a good mic, you've got a great preamp, you got a great sound on tape, you know, if you got a good instrument out there. As far as engineering, Garth never really got into that, you know. I mean, he never got into that the mechanical side of it, but he's got great ears, man. He'd hear stuff sometimes I wouldn't. That really pissed me off. But he's a great, like I said earlier, he's a great listener, and he'd hear stuff. He hears stuff in an incredible way, and a lot of times he'll come in with this like these thoughts that you have to interpret. You know, you got to kind of part his hair and figure out what he's trying to figure out. But he's got definite thoughts that when he gets them out, I mean, it's usually pretty cool. You know, I mean, I know it sounds vague as hell, but he's really been great to work from that aspect, because he's never been afraid to try anything. I mean, and trusting. That's one thing I have to say about this guy, man. He trusted. If he got a track and he felt good about it, man, he trusted it to the end, you know. I mean, and as far as once he got a mix and he believed it was right, man, he'd go to the wall for it, you know, with the label or anybody. So I mean, you know, the most unique thing about working with Garth was, you know, I was like the only guy that could see him sing these songs, you know, like the way the studio was set up. There's like a window there that even Alan can't even see see Garth, and then I can kind of see the musicians here, but I could see him perform these songs for the first time, you know, and for the last time. I mean, you know, get the final vocal on that. It was just really neat watching him through the years, watching him grow up, you know, and watching him. You know, it wasn't no time. It wasn't a couple of years before he had the studio down. He knew it, you know. But every time he'd sit down and hit play or something, he'd scare the hell out of me, and he'd do that occasionally because he had a tendency to break anything he touched. I mean, electronically, he'd touch it and it'd stop working, you know. That got to be the joke, like. But you know, the song, the Thunder Rolls, he had this concept in the beginning of having this thunder, you know. I thought, well, that's kind of neat, you know, because I don't know if that'd been used much in country music at the time or not, you know, to have like sound effects on the record,
right.
you know. And this guy's been like this through his whole career, just like lucky on stuff, you know. So, you know, we had just done this album with the Memphis Boys, and one song was called Delta Rain. At the end, it had this rain falling and thunder.
Mm-hmm.
And so I copped a little bit of that, and then we had this was like, there was hardly any sound effect records on CDs at all at the time. This is when CDs were kind of just really getting out there a lot. Anyway, we had these British album sound effects records from some famous British library over there. So we kind of put this sound together, this thunder and this lightning and rain and stuff like that. And Garth said, "Oh, that's pretty cool. Let's put it on." we're like, okay, where you want to put it on? He goes, well, put it on a DAT, you know. So we put it on a DAT player at the time, and hooked the DAT player into a couple tracks on the multi-track. So you know, come on, and he said, well, just start the tape. I said, okay. So I start the tape, and it starts playing, and he goes over and hits play on the DAT machine, and it came up in the perfect place. I mean, where it's at is where he hit it. It not only came up in the perfect place, but it rolled over right into the verse where it happened a second time at the perfect place, and we all just turned around and was like, how in the hell did you do that, you know? And it just worked. And there's been, I bet 20 times in his career where things like that have just happened, where he just, you know, he'll just look at me and say, remember the Thunder Rolls, or remember this? And I swear to God, it's happened. It's like, it's beyond luck. It's beyond the odds, you know? So somebody's up there keeping an eye on this boy, you know? And things like that have happened all the time that I've just gone, wow, it's against the odds, you know? But, you know, you think a career like that is against the odds too, you know? I mean...
Well, I mean, a good way to wrap up is your career is against the odds. Because anybody's career in this town is against the odds.
Well, that's true. Well, I tell people, you know, I should have came here as an engineer and maybe I'd have been a songwriter. You know? It's like... but I knew I wanted to do something in the music business, you know, because I never really wanted to get a real job, you know what I'm saying? It was like, you know, work, you know, not that it, you know, like 20-hour days engineering doesn't work, but there are some long days doing it. I'm being frivolous now. But, you know, when you're working on music, it's not like work, you know, because I've worked construction before, and that's work, you know. People really do work, you know. I don't want to do that.